What we are witnessing right now in Florida is awful. I question whether or not even experts thought the storm was going to be this big, this rough, this absolutely positively horrific. I had commented to a friend just moments ago that this is the first storm in my adult life where I feel that the media underplayed it. Now, I could be wrong. I could be focused on many, many other things, and maybe I missed some of the danger signs. What I know is that they immediately, those who don't like Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, took to politicizing, and that hasn't ended. I do understand that people have been hurt. There are people, we will start hearing about the horrors of this death count, which I hope is not, as some sheriffs in Florida put it, where they think it's into the hundreds, literally saying hundreds of people have been killed. The damage, that much is real. There is absolutely nothing that's going to be able to explain, to show how much damage has been done. And that damage is going to be felt by the whole of the country. I'm going to get into that. But there's something else going on, which is what's happening to this economy. And it's not that I don't think we should be paying attention to what's happening in Florida, but I think that our problem is sometimes we don't pay attention to everything, and we have to. Welcome to the show, everybody. Brought to you by Americans for Prosperity, AmericansForProsperity.org. Dear Lord, the economic numbers showing a reduction in GDP, we contracted. We are in a recession, and it doesn't matter if the Biden administration or anybody else wants to say so or otherwise. This is a recession. 2 negative quarters of GDP growth is a recession. That's not some term that's bandied about. That's the reality. We have been utilizing this as an understanding of recession for years, and all of a sudden, under this administration, somehow that's not true. It is remarkably true. Things are absolutely rough with no end in sight. When we take a look at the market just today, with the Dow down 458, with the NASDAQ down 314, and by the way, the lows were well into the 500s. I don't know if it hit 600 or not. And you say to me, yeah, but Tony, I never really trust where the market numbers are. Anyway, do you trust the idea or accept the idea that if the GDP is contracting and contracted 2 quarters in a row, that we are in a recession? Because if not, well, then my gosh, what is it that you actually believe is a question that we have to ask everybody. The inflation is here to stay. The inflation is going to be well into 2024. The chip shortage is here today, is here to stay, and that is also into 2024. These things have to be addressed, and right now they're getting pushed off the front page because of the hurricane. Please don't get me wrong. This is awful and terrible and horrible, and not a time for this.
Our commitment to tackling the climate crisis, which threatens all of us. We're seeing the consequences of climate change around the world very vividly, including in the United States right now. And I know your nations feel it acutely, and for you all, it's an existential threat. It's an existential threat.
I would argue anyone with anyone, anywhere right now, that what's happened to the economy and the spending going on in the economy, and that continues to happen, is more of a threat. The idea that climate change causes hurricanes, I'm going to say that's not the case. Meaning, hurricanes do happen. It happens. And have they been going on for, well, longer than we've been on planet Earth? If you say to me, we shouldn't burn tires in the middle of the road, if you say to me, we should be good stewards of the environment, engaging in actual conservation, well, that's no issue. I'm down. You cut down a tree, you plant a tree is something that's pretty smart. Hey, let's not take levels of pollution and just pour them into streams. That's pretty smart too. But when you get into this, guys, or into this game of, well, climate change has caused all this, you're saying man is guilty and therefore man has to suffer and therefore man has to change, and not just change, bring themselves back, regress. The people who believe this also believe that your problem or our problem is that you're using your air conditioning. It's your car. That's why they moved to electric vehicles. How in the world will the electric vehicles get charged right now in Florida when at the height it was 2.5 million people, according to different reports, different places, 2.5 million people without power? How are they supposed to get from point A to point B to the extent they can get from point A to point B? A reliance on an all-electric fleet is not practical. First, the power has to be generated somewhere and somehow, and that is going to come from oil, or it's going to come from gas, or it's going to come from other sources. Secondly, if you don't have an electrical grid because it's down because of a hurricane, what's the plan? How do things move? This isn't something in the ether. This isn't a weird question. This is right now. You want to talk about a hurricane? You want to get political about a hurricane? Okay, President Biden, how do those people with all those Teslas, and I don't want to just talk about Tesla, there's other electric vehicles, how do they get from point A to point B? I'm a believer in electric vehicles. I've got zero problem with it. You give me hydrogen cars, I'm totally down. By the way, if a car could work on solar power, I'd be super excited. Right now, it can't. I have no issue with solar and I have no issue with wind. Well, I do have an issue with wind because honestly, what did the birds do to you? Stop killing birds. Let's put an end to the turbines. These things are not problems in terms of as ideas. They're actually good ideas and ideas that we should be totally into to exploring. But the idea that we would be so radical as to scream climate change, and give up oil and gas, which work and can get us from point A to point B. Did you see all the people filling up small gas cans and getting ready because that's their generators or other vehicles? People in Teslas, photos of people in Teslas. I don't know, maybe they were photoshopped. I don't think they were. In Teslas filling up gas cans. There's a reality here. And the reality is that a reliance on a totally electric world isn't rational. It's an irrational thought. The idea that there's no place for gas and no place for oil is nonsense. It is dangerous, and it's a lack of leadership to say so. It's also a lack of leadership to engage in threats.
I also want to say again to the oil and gas executives, do not use this storm as an excuse to raise gasoline prices or gouge the American public. The price of oil has dropped in recent weeks. The price of gas should be going down as rapidly. It's not. My experts inform me the production of only about 160,000 barrels a day has been impacted by this storm.
Now that happens to be true. That's where a lot of people were. They didn't expect the storm to affect gas prices all over the country. The Midwest has been dealing with increased gas prices. I'm staring right now. There it is. There's a gas station right there as I smoke this wonderful cigar from Espinosa Cigars. This is the Laranja. Espinosa's doing some fine work these days. The gas price there is $4.08 a gallon. 2 weeks ago, that was $3.60. That's the reality here in Indiana. A lot of Midwest states have seen an increase in gas prices because we had a refinery go offline for a little while. And of course, it made an impact. It made a difference. And we are not a nation that even thinks about building new refineries to ensure we can constantly keep things going. And after all, why should we build a refinery for gas when electric's the future? Joe Biden is the president of the United States threatening oil and gas companies, basically telling America these are dirty dealers who are only here to steal and rob from you, and they're making record profits. Look, I am not in the business of telling people what is too much. What's too much profit? How does that even work? Who could possibly answer that question? Only the elitist could think that there's such a thing as making too much, them deciding that you have enough. I'm not interested in allowing Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or President Biden to make that decision. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the mind, they don't have the right to tell anybody that they're making too much. What an absolutely horrific thing for them to say. And to utilize this as a way of attacking oil companies, to utilize this as a way of screaming climate change, to move forward an agenda that really can't work for Americans. And we're seeing that it won't necessarily work for Floridians. Electric isn't a bad idea. The idea that it's all or nothing is an absolutely terrible idea. The economy is in bad shape. The 30-year fixed mortgage, 6.7%. 6.7%. As Dr. Matt Will, economist at the University of Indianapolis, explained, when Joe Biden took office, it was 2.7%. It's 4% up. And why would we think that changes? If we have the federal funds rate, right? So that's the rate which banks lend each other money in the overnight. And that for forever was kept at like 0.25%, right in there, right? And it was done artificially. And I think there are people who could argue, okay, maybe that was a little too extreme for a little too long. But right now, it's at 3 to 3.25. And Jerome Powell, who's the chairman of the Fed, has said it's going to be 4.6. So if we're at 6.7% on a 30-year fix now, why would anybody think we won't be at, if they do go to 4.6, at numbers like 10% on a mortgage rate? And that puts an end to housing. You know what puts an end to housing? The fact that you have to rebuild Florida. We have not yet started talking about the economic impacts. You've seen the videos. And the videos are of water so high that cars are kind of like floating in the middle of the street. All those cars are now gone. Those cars have to be replaced. But there are no new cars to replace them with. We know this because there's a chip shortage that will not in any way begin to be solved until 2024. Intel has said so. Nintendo has said so. A series of others talking about this chip shortage, and it's not going away. So that means people are going to be buying used cars, which means the used car market, which in the last cycle, when we saw the inflation numbers, went down 0.1%, that number comes back up. So if you haven't bought your used car yet, you better do it today, because the prices are going up, and they're going to Florida. How about the idea of construction material? Yeah, I spoke to someone about building a shed in my backyard. I need a shed that I can actually sit in and set up the equipment in. I can smoke cigars in, to be able to create content throughout the winter. I've talked about, thought about, building on to the house, but those prices are nuts. Those prices are insane and surreal. I just can't do it. So, all right, I'll get a shed and I'll do this. Am I sure I can do it now? Because not only will the materials be going to Florida, the people who do the work will be going to Florida for the work, because it's very clear that rebuilding is going to be massive, and not just in that Fort Myers area. The way the storm tracked and the speed at which it went left flooding and flooding and flooding. There's going to be tremendous damage reported throughout that entire swath, throughout the central part of Florida, getting into Cape Canaveral. It's going to change everything that happens in terms of construction. It's going to change where the labor force is. Man, this is a problem that compounds itself onto another problem. Construction materials are going to go up, labor's going to go up, and of course, used cars are going to go up. Now, someone can disagree with me, but do the math. If you just lost, 20,000 cars, but I don't think we lost just 20,000. I don't think that's the way that went down. I'm not saying that's the way it happened. I think we may have lost many, many more. They all have to be replaced, and they're going to be replaced in a way that increases the price. That's all there is to it. And on top of this, we are still a nation that is spending. So all of our inflation issues, add these issues, and we're still a nation that's spending. And who is explaining this well? The guy who was with the Clinton years, Larry Summers.
We basically had inflation under control for 40 years, despite the fact that the price of oil fluctuated, despite the fact that there were all kinds of supply shocks. We lost the thread, along with many other countries, about a year and a half ago, with massively expansionary policies relative to the size of the GDP gap. The fiscal stimulus was 5 times as large as it had been during the financial crisis.
Everybody on the political left cheers the 1.9, was it billion? No, billion. It was billion. Was it billion? No, it wasn't trillion. It was billion. Sometimes I forget myself. They applaud it. They cheer it. Look at the great work this has done for America. Look at the inflation it has brought us. The numbers today on the GDP, man, that's as big of a story when we talk about disaster and ruination. Now, it doesn't change the fact that people may have lost their lives, and it doesn't change the fact that we shouldn't dismiss what's happening in Florida. I'm not doing that, not in the slightest. I'm aware of the fact that we have to be able to talk about two things at the same time. This economy is seriously, seriously problematic. Let me go to the comments here. Forget the doom and gloom, Tony. This is from Eric. What's up, Eric? Tell me about the artist of the funky jam at the top of the hour on your morning and afternoon shows. My theme song. I should play it here. I'll grab it. My theme song is done. It was created by Gary Stephen Eaton, who is a musician out of Los Angeles. Really a rockabilly guy, unbelievably good man. Really, really just a wonderful, wonderful cat. I like Gary quite a bit. And I came to him and I said, when I was living in Los Angeles, I said, I have an idea for a theme song. And I tried to play it for him on guitar. And he was like, okay, all right, just stop, please. Please, please, for the sake of our friendship, just stop. He's like, I think I know what you're going for. Let me work on it. And he created the theme song. So Gary Stephen Eaton is the guy who did my theme song right there. According to Dave Carver, Katrina was proof that there is no plan. I'm not quite sure how you mean it. I'm not quite sure how you mean that there's no plan. No plan for what? Response? I'm not so sure about that. We're now going to be seeing the response take place, seeing how Governor DeSantis deals with the crisis. FEMA's already there. We're going to see how everything has been coordinated, how people have talked to each other. But man, this is going to take time. This is not going to get fixed in an hour. This isn't going to get fixed in an hour. Anybody who thinks otherwise is crazy. And not a month. This is going to take time. So I'm not quite sure if the Katrina conversation holds right there. It doesn't hold for me. And yes, we send billions to Ukraine. Let's not confuse our issues. I am somebody who understands. I accept the fact that we are sending money to Ukraine. I'm okay with forcing Vladimir Putin to suffer. I also understand that we're sending a lot of money. And we're going to have to make a decision about exactly how much money we can send, exactly how much money this is going to take. I think that's right, because we're now going to take a look at, well, what are we doing? Supporting Ukraine, or are we going to support the American people? Which one is it going to be? Which one is it going to be? That is a serious question. Jennifer recently found the station. Hey, Jen, how are you? I'm glad you did. I appreciate it. My shows are on WIBC, WIBC.com, 6 to 9 a.m. and noon to 3. And then weekends, you can either hear my Cigar and Bourbon show each that's on 60-plus stations across the country. Actually, here and put together from my weekly show on WSB in Atlanta, KRMG in Tulsa, News Talk St. Louis in St. Louis, WOWO in Indiana, MNC, which is the South Bend area of Indiana, kind of that Michiana area, because it hits Michigan as well right there. Guys, I'm glad that you're part of the show. I'm glad that you are here today. And of course, I appreciate more than ever Americans for Prosperity, AmericansForProsperity.org. Economic liberty, free speech, good people, good, solid people. We agree about most things. And honestly, sometimes that's as good as you could do. I like the work that they've been doing lately. You should check them out, AmericansForProsperity.org. Find out where they are in your state and catch a meeting or go talk to them. See how you can get involved. I think that's good work. I appreciate you. I got to run. Catch you tomorrow. Take care.